Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on how to improve manager effectiveness without hiring externally in just 30 days. There is a hidden cost inside most organizations. It never appears on a financial report, but you feel it every day. It shows up as poor performance, it shows up as disengaged teams, overwhelmed managers, senior leaders constantly firefighting, and good people leaving because weak performance is tolerated. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most organizations are not suffering from a people problem. They're suffering from a leadership capability problem. Hello, my name is Suzanne Powell, and today I'm going to show you how to identify, assess, and uplift the performance of your existing managers and leaders using a clear, structured system that can be implemented in just 30 days. This webinar is automated by design because I know how demanding your day is, so you can watch this whenever it suits you. And in the spirit of transparency, at the end, I'm going to make you an offer, but it won't be right for everyone, and everything I share today will give you the knowledge to build and run this system yourself, if you choose to. But if you want the shortcut, the templates, the structure, the AI prompts, and the process already built for you, I'll show you how to get that too. Is that okay? Now, before we get into the system, let me explain why I'm so passionate about this. Throughout my career, I've worked in organisations with 70,000 employees, 37,000 employees, and much smaller businesses too. I've worked in London, I've worked in Birmingham, I've worked from home, and I was even once headquartered on the beautiful, warm, sunny Caribbean island of Jamaica. I'll let you guess which one was my favourite. But there was one defining moment that shaped the way I think about leadership. Early in my career, I worked for a director who was deeply committed to developing his people. I remember him saying to me that if he did his job properly, that one day he would be working for me. And my first thought was, oh, can't wait to be his boss. But my second thought was much more important. It was, what an incredible mindset for a leader to have. And that experience changed everything for me. It shaped my whole career going forward. I've been fortunate to receive extensive development myself. I was trained and became accredited in Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. I became accredited in neuro-linguistic programming. I was a senior member of talent pools at BT and Openreach. And as a transformation director, I delivered over £67 million in signed off cost benefits. But none of that was achieved alone. It was achieved by working for exceptional leaders within strong cultures and by learning how to build teams that go on to become high performers themselves. And that's why I'm here today, because the same methods, tools, and approaches that helped me and my teams achieve those results can now be used by other organizations too. The difference is that today, with AI and structured software, you can deliver the same kind of clarity and improvement in just a fraction of the time. So let me ask you something. What would you do if you were given a team that no one else wanted and you were expected to deliver multi-million pound results? Because that was my reality. And like many of you, I had a demanding day job, targets to hit, deadlines to meet, pressure from every direction. And I knew one thing for certain. If I was going to deliver, I needed a high performing team. But here was the problem. When I was brought into organizations to deliver cost reduction programs, I wasn't given the high performers. I was given the people who were overlooked, the people where if their work stopped, it didn't really matter. And on one occasion, I was even given someone the business was actively trying to manage out. So the question became, how do you deliver multi-million pound transformation with a team that lacks confidence, motivation, and belief? Not in theory, not with extra time, not with extra resources, but while still doing your day job. That was the challenge. And that was when I realized I needed a system, not motivation, not vague leadership theory. I needed a practical framework that would help me build capability, increase motivation, improve performance, create accountability, and deliver measurable results. Because once you have the right system, you do not need a perfect team to get exceptional results. You build one. I used this system twice to turn underperforming teams into high performing teams. The first team, they delivered £20.2 million in cost reduction benefits. And the second team, which was just 5 people, they delivered £7.8 million. That's over £28 million in cost savings. And here's the important part. On both occasions, I still had a day job, targets, deadlines, pressure. So the real question I had to solve wasn't, how do I fix this team? It was, how do I do my job and turn this team into high performers at the same time? Because that's the reality for every manager and leader. No one has spare time to fix performance. No one has capacity to run initiatives on the side. You have to improve the team while the work is still happening. And that forced me to look at what I had seen repeatedly throughout my career. Over the years, I saw the same problems again and again. Brilliant individuals promoted into management and then classed as underperforming. Poor performance left unaddressed because managers did not know how to tackle it. Endless appraisals that changed nothing. Teams working hard but delivering below their potential. Leaders firefighting instead of leading. And poor performance disappearing once it was measured and managed. And I realised something important. The issue was not effort, it was not intelligence, it was not commitment. It was the absence of a clear, practical system for building leadership capability inside the team. A system managers could use while doing their day job. A way to assess, understand, and improve leadership and team performance without adding more work by just changing how the work was led. So today, I'm going to let you into 3 secrets. These are the belief shifts that make high-performing teams possible. Secret number 1. You do not need a complicated performance process to get results. Most organizations make performance management too complicated, and the more complicated it becomes, the less effective it becomes. People are scored against competencies, which is sensible, but those ratings are often based on a manager's interpretation of what good looks like. My version of somebody who's good might be different from yours. Then the organization introduces leveling meetings where we all turn up to discuss each person's individual performance and put them within a scale. Then there's bell curves. Then people who are genuinely good are pushed down to a generally satisfactory just to fit a distribution model. It becomes demoralizing for employees, frustrating for managers, and completely subjective. And there is a cost to over-engineering the process. Just being conservative, let's look at that. Writing the appraisal, holding the meeting, and document it might take 3 hours per employee. If a manager has 8 direct reports, that's 24 hours. That's 3 full working days. For 10 managers, that's 240 hours. That's 6 full working weeks spent writing and delivering appraisals. That doesn't include the leveling meetings, HR discussion, or rework. 6 weeks of management time producing something that most employees do not find useful and most managers do not feel confident doing. And often the only people who get a development plan are those that are marked as needs improvement. So development becomes a punishment, not a prize. But performance management is not about policing. It's about clarity, fairness, accountability, development, protecting standards, and identifying future leaders. It protects your profits, it protects your culture, any talent, and your reputation. So the answer is not to stop assessing capability, and it's not to create an even more complicated appraisal system. The answer is a high-performance people system, a framework that clearly describes what good looks like in behaviour, not opinion. For each capability, there's a clear description of the behaviours expected at each level. The employee highlights where they believe they sit and provides evidence to support. The manager does the same. Once that's done, you can instantly see where there is alignment, where there's a gap, where development is needed, and where real leadership potential exists. No bell curves, no subjective guessing, no wasted time, just clarity that leads to a meaningful development plan that everyone is entitled to. And that's the difference. Secret number 3, people don't resist structure, they resist unfairness. The third belief that people often have is that my managers won't want to do this. And I understand why you might think that. Performance management does have a bad reputation. For many people, it feels like criticism, judgment. It's just a paper trail. It's a route to being managed out. But that's not what this is. This is also development. It's talent pools and it's succession planning. And when it's positioned properly, people respond differently because people do not resist structure. They just resist unfairness and inconsistency. When expectations are unclear, when good is subjective, and when some people get away with poor performance while others carry the load, that is when people disengage. But when you introduce clear expectations, fair standards, transparent conversations, evidence-based feedback, and development plans for everyone, not just poor performers, something different happens. Resistance turns into clarity, and clarity builds trust. For the first time, people understand what is expected, where they stand, and how to improve. Conscientious people, the people already working hard, welcome it because they hate seeing other people get away with poor performance while they carry the weight. You do not need a full organizational rollout to start seeing results. You need one team, one manager, one structured approach. Because when results improve, engagement increases and issues reduce. The business does not resist it. It starts asking for more of it. The system does not rely on having a great team. The system creates the great team. Now, don't get me wrong, not everyone will become or want to become a high flyer. You also need the people who just come in and get the job done. But what you don't need is people who don't carry out the work to a good standard, people who try to get away with the bare minimum, and people who are under the radar and not delivering the goods. It's all about bringing the underperformers up to the required level and developing the people who could go on to become your future managers and leaders. So now that we've dealt with the 3 biggest beliefs, it doesn't need to be complicated. You can deliver it without becoming an expert, and people are more likely to welcome the clarity than resist it. Let me show you the actual system. This is the framework I used to improve team performance, identify capability gaps, and create measurable results. It starts with one simple principle. You cannot improve what you cannot see. So step 1 is clarity, where you assess the existing leadership capability. What I'm talking about today are your managers and leaders, but once it's rolled out across managers, it can easily be implemented with your non-managers or your team members. So before you can improve any leadership capability, you need to define what good looks like, and that starts with the basics. Job descriptions. Now, most people have not seen their job descriptions since they applied for the job. Some have never seen one at all. But if someone does not have a clear job description, you cannot fairly hold them accountable. A job description defines, what am I responsible for? What does success look like? What standards am I being measured against? What is not my responsibility? And without that, expectations become subjective, and subjective expectations create conflict. It protects fair performance management. You can't say you're not meeting expectations if those expectations were never clearly defined. A job description forms the foundation for KPIs, key performance indicators, for objectives, for development plans, for performance improvement plans, promotion decisions, and succession planning. You might be thinking, I don't have time to write a job description for everyone. But that's exactly what the system includes. It includes templates, prompts, and AI support so the job description can be created quickly and consistently. The next part is the leadership diagnostic, the competency framework. This is where we define the behaviours expected from managers and leaders. For each competency, there is a description. I mentioned this earlier, for each level of that behaviour. And the individual completes the self-assessment by choosing the description that feels the closest fit. They also write a paragraph or two of evidence that supports that decision. The manager completes their assessment of the individual in exactly the same way. The leadership diagnostic then identifies alignment, so where they both agree, the gaps where there's a disagreement between their capability. It identifies their strengths, the development needs, and their potential to go on to promotion. It then creates a clear and comprehensive report and development plan. And that's powerful because it changes the conversation from, I think you need to improve, to here's the behaviour we're expecting, and here's the evidence, and here's the development action. That is a completely different conversation. The structured framework anchors discussions to observable behaviours. You get reduced ambiguity and greater consistency across teams, as well as enabling targeted development, not generic training. So rather than sending everyone on the same leadership course, this will give you better return on investment on any leadership development spend. There are other benefits. It enables measurable leadership capability tracking. So because levels are clearly defined, you can benchmark current capability, you can track improvement over time, you can report leadership capability to executives, to the board, but also when embedded properly, this framework becomes a recruitment tool. You can use it to select your next candidates. It becomes a performance management tool. It's a development tool, a succession planning tool, and a culture tool. It shifts leadership from we hope our managers are good to we know exactly where our leadership capability stands and how we're improving it. The competency framework defines how your managers and leaders should behave, how they communicate, make decisions, manage performance, delegate, lead change, all of the competencies that a good manager or leader should have. And as part of the high performance people system, we include a list of the competencies and their descriptions, as well as the methodology for completing the assessment. You can pick and choose the competencies you want. If there are some that are missing that you want added in, we will create them for you. Let me tell you why understanding this matters. Have you ever promoted someone because they were exceptional at their job and then realized you had turned them into your worst manager? I have. We had a management vacancy. One of the team members applied. He was outstanding, fast, efficient, high standards, completely reliable. I assumed he would lead the team brilliantly, so I gave him the job, and it went wrong. Not because he wasn't capable, not because he didn't care, but because he'd never been shown how to manage people. As an individual contributor, he controlled his own output. As a manager, everything changed. He was now managing people he used to work alongside. He had to rely on others to deliver. He became frustrated. He struggled to delegate. He corrected instead of coached. He micromanaged instead of developing the team. And he tried to control performance instead of building capability. And this happens in organizations all the time. A high-performing individual is promoted into management, and the organization accidentally creates a struggling manager. Now you've lost a top performer and you've gained a weak manager. And that's why the competency framework matters. It separates technical performance from leadership capability. If I'd had that framework at that point in time, I would have been able to see the shortfall in the management skills he needed. So step number 2 is visibility. This is where we gather all performance data. So in the previous step, you identified the behaviours and competencies you were looking for, and you made the expectations clear. But once you've defined what good looks like, then you need to take the next step, which is the visibility. Because knowing what's expected is only half the picture. You now also need to understand what is actually happening in practice within the business. And to get a complete view of each manager, you need to look at performance from multiple angles. So this includes goals and objectives. What is the individual expected to deliver and how are they delivering it? How well are they delivering it? Business KPIs. What impact are they having on the business? Employee engagement surveys. How is their leadership experienced by the team? And 360-degree feedback. How are they perceived by others around them? Because leadership isn't just about how someone shows up. It's about the results they create. Why is this full picture important? Well, when I've taken on new teams in the past, one of the first things I've done is introduce the structured goals and objectives as part of the high performance people system. And almost every time something surprising happens, we discover work that doesn't add value. On one occasion, I inherited a team responsible for business MIS reporting. They were producing dozens of reports every week and month, and no one had questioned them. They just churning them out. So we added read receipts. And then we analysed the data. Where there were reports with very few read confirmations, we contacted the distribution list and said, unless we receive confirmation this report is required, it will be discontinued in 4 weeks. So what was the result? Well, we stopped sending 24% of the reports. Almost a quarter of the work was unnecessary. Think about that. 24% of time reclaimed, 24% of capacity freed, 24% of effort redirected to higher value activity. That is not a small optimization. That is operational transformation. And the lesson is simple. If work is not adding value to the business, the customer, or to the strategic objectives, it should not be consuming time, resources, or intention. Leadership without measurable impact is just good intention. Let me give you another example. I once took over a team of around 20 network planners. I knew instinctively some people were producing more planning jobs than others. I could probably guess who the high performers were, but I couldn't prove it. And without proof, you can't have fair performance conversations. So I introduced one simple measure. How many jobs is each person producing per day? In a team of roughly 20 people, one person was completing 28 jobs a day, but another was just completing 3. And that's not a small gap. That's a productivity chasm. So then I added a quality measure. How many jobs required rework or had errors? Now I had 2 KPIs, output and accuracy. That's it. And with just those 2 measures, everything changed. I could have evidence-based performance conversations. I could identify best practice from the top performers, and I could coach the lower performers. I could remove assumptions and emotion, and over time, the team increased to 21 jobs per day on average, with quality maintained. We outperformed other teams nationally because they simply weren't being measured. High performers stopped feeling resentful, lower performers stopped feeling overwhelmed, and the team dynamic improved dramatically. And all of that started with 2 simple measurements. So you can't fix what you don't measure, and this applies to managers too. You may know whether they hit revenue, cost, or output targets, but do you know if they're managing performance effectively, if they're developing their teams, if they're communicating clearly, leading change properly? Do you know any of those things? Because that's where behavioral measurement becomes critical. Let me ask you this. Are all of your teams working on the right things? Are you measuring activity or value? Are the tasks being done simply because we've always done it? Because this is not optional, it's a strategic filter. It forces you to ask, why are we doing this? And if there isn't a compelling answer, it stops. And if there is a compelling answer, then we measure it. And then we see if we can prove it even more. So let's take a look at goals and objectives. Very simple, but very often misunderstood. Goals and objectives define what success actually looks like for each individual. Because if someone doesn't know what they're expected to deliver, how can you fairly assess their performance? Goals should be clear, specific, and measurable, but they shouldn't be vague and not open to interpretation. They should answer questions like, what does this person need to deliver? What outcomes are they responsible for? What does success look like in this role? And most importantly, goals must be aligned to the wider business objectives, because it's not just about people being busy, it's about people working on the right things. When goals are clear, something powerful happens. Performance becomes easier to measure, conversation becomes more objective, accountability increases, priorities become clearer. Without clear goals, performance discussions become subjective. With clear goals, they become factual. And that's the difference between, I think you're doing well, and here's what you were expected to deliver, here's what actually happened. And that's when clarity starts to drive performance. Now, goals and objectives tell you what an individual is responsible for, but business KPIs tell you whether those efforts are actually delivering results, because activity does not equal impact. Someone can be busy all day, every day, but if it's not moving the business forward, it's not performance. Business KPIs define the outcome that matter most in the organization. They answer questions like, are we improving productivity? Are we reducing costs? Are we increasing revenue or output? Are we delivering value to the customer? And this is where leadership becomes visible, because strong leaders don't just manage activity, they drive measurable results through their teams. When KPIs are clear and consistently tracked, you can link leadership directly to business performance. You remove ambiguity from performance conversations. You identify what's working and what isn't, and you focus your effort on what actually moves the needle. Without KPIs, you're relying on perception, but with KPIs, you're working with evidence. And that's when performance stops being a discussion and starts becoming a measurable outcome. Now, let's look at something many organizations overlook: how leadership is actually experienced by the team. Because performance isn't just about what gets delivered, it's about how it gets delivered. Employee engagement surveys give you the insight into what's really happening beneath the surface, not what's reported upwards and not what's assumed, but what employees genuinely think and feel. Employee engagement surveys answer questions like, do people feel supported by their manager? Are expectations clear? Do they feel valued and listened to? Is the team motivated and engaged? Because disengagement doesn't usually show up loudly, it shows up quietly. It shows up as reduced effort, minimal initiatives, increased absenteeism, and people doing enough, just enough to get by. And by the time you see it in performance metrics, the damage is already done. And that's why an employee engagement survey isn't a nice to have, it's a strategic diagnostic tool. When you use engagement surveys effectively, you gain honest and filtered insight, you identify leadership strengths and blind spots, you spot risks early before they escalate, and you create opportunities to improve team culture. Without this, you're guessing how your teams feel. With it, you're listening to reality. And that's when leadership starts to improve, not just in results, but in experience. Now let's take this one step further, because performance engagement tell part of the story, but they don't always show you how a leader is perceived by the people around them. That's where 360-degree feedback comes in. It gives you a well-rounded view of leadership behavior by gathering input from multiple perspectives. That could be peers, it could be team members, or it could be stakeholders. It answers questions like, how effectively does the person communicate? Do they provide clarity and direction? How do they handle feedback, pressure, and conflict? What is it actually like to work with them? Because here's the reality: there is often a gap between how someone sees themselves and how others experience them. 360-degree feedback helps close that gap. When used effectively, it highlights perception gaps. It surfaces blind spots before they become problems. It removes bias by bringing in multiple viewpoints. And it makes feedback specific, evidence-based, and harder to dismiss. Without it, feedback can feel vague. You might say you need to improve communication, but with it, the conversation changes. Now you can say, multiple team members have said expectations are sometimes unclear. Let's explore that. And that's a completely different conversation. Less opinion, more evidence, more impact. So now we move to step 3, diagnosis. This is where you turn data into insight. So at this point you have the data, but data alone is not insight. It's just a set of numbers, comments, ratings, and observations. Diagnosis is where you turn that data into the insight you need. It's where you step back and ask, what is this actually telling us? Diagnosis looks for patterns. So what is showing up consistently? Risks. Where could problems emerge if nothing changes? Gaps. Where are expectations not being met? Strengths. What's working well that can be leveraged? Misalignment, where perception and reality don't match. And high potential talent, so that will help you create your succession plan. And this is where opinions are replaced with evidence. You stop saying, I think this manager is struggling, and you start saying, the data shows a gap in communication, delegation, and performance management. And that's a completely different level of clarity because now you're not relying on opinion, you're working with evidence. When diagnosis is done well, you remove emotion and bias from decisions. You focus on the real issues and not the symptoms. You prioritize what will have the biggest impact, and you create a clear direction for development. Without diagnosis, you're reacting, but with diagnosis, you're making informed decisions, and that's what turns information into action. At this point, you have clarity, you have data, you have insight, but insight alone doesn't change performance because awareness without action leads nowhere. This is where everything comes together. So step 4 is about creating a personal development plan. It's about turning insight into clear, practical action. It answers the question, what specifically needs to happen next? Because every manager should have a development plan that's directly linked to their capability gaps, their role expectations, their business objectives, and the behaviors required for success. Not generic training, not attend a course and hope for the best, but specific actions, clear focus, and measurable outcomes. That might include targeted skill development. It might include coaching and feedback activities or on-the-job application, stretch assignments, or new responsibilities. And importantly, each plan should include what needs to improve, how will it improve, when will it be reviewed, and what does success look like? Because when people know exactly what to work on, progress accelerates. When this is done well, development becomes focused and relevant. Accountability increases. Progress becomes visible and measurable, and performance improves faster. And this isn't just for underperformance. Your high performers should also have development plans to grow, stretch, and prepare for future roles. Because development isn't about fixing people, it's about building capability across the entire organization. Without action, nothing changes, but with action, everything starts to move. Now, every manager knows exactly what to work on and how to improve. This is where performance development becomes practical. It's not vague, it's not generic, it's not go on a leadership course and hope something happens, something changes. It's specific, it's targeted, and it's measurable. In terms of development plans, here is something else that you might want to consider. You'll have people in your business who are doing a solid job, and actually they're quite happy. They come to work, they do what's expected, and they earn a fair day's pay, and that's okay. But just because someone isn't struggling doesn't mean they don't want to grow. This is your opportunity to ask a different question. What else would you like? There may be people who are thinking about their next step. They may want that promotion, and with the right tools and support, you can help them get there. Others might want to broaden their experience, see how a different department is working, and that's great for you because you can then flex them across 2 departments. They might want to move into a new area. They might want to build new skills. They might want to develop within their current role, learn something new like AI, take on mentoring, or simply become better at what they already do. And all of that strengthens your business because the person who learns AI today might be the one who automates your processes tomorrow. And the person who wants to learn first aid might go on to save someone's life. And the person who develops new skills might become your next leader. Development isn't just about fixing underperformance, it's about investing in your people so they grow and they stay and they contribute at a higher level. Because when your people thrive, your business does too. Let's take a look at step number 5. Now, step 5 is about feedback, and this is where we turn insight into growth. This is where everything becomes real because you can have the best data, the clearest insights, the most detailed development plans. But if the conversation isn't right, nothing changes. So, step 5 is about feedback and, more importantly, how that feedback is delivered. Because feedback is the moment where insight turns into growth. And this is where many managers struggle. They either avoid the conversation altogether or they keep it vague to avoid discomfort. But vague feedback doesn't drive improvement, clarity does. Great feedback should be specific, it should be balanced, it should be evidence based, it should absolutely be development focused, and it should be linked to action. It's not about saying you need to improve, it's about saying, here's what we expected, here's what happened, and here's what we're going to do next. And that's a completely different conversation because now it's not personal, it's practical. And when great feedback is delivered well, people understand exactly where they stand. They know exactly what needs to change. They feel supported and not criticised, and they're far more likely to take action. It also builds something even more important. It builds trust. Because when people know they're getting honest, fair, and consistent feedback, they stop second guessing. They stop worrying about where they stand and they start focusing on improvement. Feedback isn't about catching people out, it's about helping people move forward. And when you get this right, this is where performance really starts to accelerate. Step 6 is benchmarking. It's about establishing performance baselines. Now, this is the step that most organizations skip, and it's the reason so many improvement efforts lose momentum. Because if you don't know where you're starting from, how do you know if anything is actually improving? So, step 6 is about establishing a clear baseline of performance so you can measure progress over time. This is where you answer questions like, where are we today? What does good look like currently? Where are the biggest gaps? What needs to improve first? Because without a baseline, everything is subjective. You might feel like things are getting better, but you can't prove it. And what gets measured gets improved. When you benchmark properly, you prioritize improvement areas, you create a clear starting point, you define realistic targets, you track progress over time, and you can demonstrate improvement with evidence. And this is powerful because now you can show how leadership capability is improving, how performance is increasing, and where further development is needed. It also changes the conversation at a senior level. You move from we think things are improving to we can clearly see the impact this is having. And that's what turns this from a people initiative into a business improvement strategy. Because once you can measure it, you can manage it. And when you complete these steps, you improve the performance of the managers and leaders you already have. And yes, there may be people who can't or won't improve. And if that happens, the system gives you the evidence you need to make the decision fairly, professionally, and with less risk. Let's talk about the risk of doing nothing. So, most managers do not ignore poor performance, they work around it, they compensate, they firefight, they pick up the slack. And that is where the real problem starts. Do you have people in your organization right now who are underperforming? Maybe your managers don't have the time, energy, confidence, or structure to deal with it properly. And it's not that they don't care, there's always something more urgent, so the issue continues. Weeks become months and slowly the impact spreads. The team becomes disengaged, absenteeism creeps up, and high performers get frustrated. Managers spend more time solving people problems than leading. HR and senior leaders get dragged into issues that should never have reached them. You may not see poor performance clearly on the bottom line, but you are paying for it operationally every single day. You pay for it in wasted time, in lost focus, in frustrated managers, in disengaged teams, constant firefighting, missed opportunities. Poor performance survives not because it's accepted, but because it's unmanaged, and that's the real cost. So now the question comes, what would it mean for your business if you could install this system in 30 days? What if you could improve productivity by 5%, reduce churn, stop people leaving, increase engagement, have your employees become advocates for your company, give managers more confidence, reduce senior leadership firefighting, create a clear view of leadership capability? And what if you could do it without building everything from scratch? At the start, I said I would make you an offer, so let me show you what is included. The High Performance People System Stage 1 Elevate is about improving the performance of your existing managers and leaders. It's a paid diagnostic where we assess your current managers and show you exactly where performance is breaking down. This stage is critical because it sets the tone for everything that follows. Elevate combines knowledge, templates, AI prompts, and software to help you assess and uplift the performance of your existing managers and leaders. In step 1, you get the Leadership Capability Assessment Pack, and that includes job description templates and AI prompts. If you don't have job descriptions already, this will help you complete a job description for each individual. The job description is important because you can't say you're not meeting expectations if those expectations were never clearly defined. And the additional benefit of having job descriptions is they can be used for recruitment. You wouldn't need to pull one together for a job advert in the future. You also get the Leadership Competency Framework and Diagnostic Tool. The system will analyse the gaps between the managers and the individual's self-assessment. It identifies their development needs as well as their strengths and their potential for future promotions. This element is done for you by us. We collate the individual and the manager's assessments, and we use the data as part of the overall development report that's created for each individual manager. It includes free customization of the competencies, which means you can use the ones we provide, or you can create your own, and that will be decided as part of your onboarding call. The Leadership Capability Assessment Pack has a value of £2,500. The second thing that you're going to get is the Leadership Insight Data Pack. This includes template and guidance on setting business KPIs and business goals. You may already have business goals and KPIs in place, but it's worth revisiting this for best practice. If you don't have goals and KPIs in place, then this will tell you everything you need to know. And if you have any questions, then you can use the setup calls to sense check anything that crops up during the exercise. You also get 360-degree feedback templates. This is another done-for-you element, and we coordinate the surveys and pull the responses into the individual's development report. We provide employee engagement survey templates. We'll provide the templates and the guidance, and the importance of this exercise is anonymity. So as such, if that's too difficult for you to organise, we can run this for you, but it would be at an added cost. The value of the Leadership Insight Data Pack is £2,000. Next, you're going to get the Feedback and Coaching Toolkit, because insight alone doesn't improve performance, conversations do. So this includes structured one-to-one templates, feedback training and guides, and coaching frameworks. The goal here is to make feedback constructive, consistent, and easier for managers to deliver confidently, especially difficult conversations that are often avoided. And the value of this toolkit is £1,500. You also get the complete 30-day implementation roadmap. So this is the step-by-step rollout plan for the entire system. So instead of wondering what do we do next, everything's already mapped out for you. All you do is enter your start date and the roadmap populates itself automatically. And the value of that roadmap is £1,000. Just to build the system itself, before we even analyse a single manager, you're already looking at £7,000 worth of value. But the next thing you're going to get is the paid diagnostic and reporting system. The system takes competency assessments, it takes 360-degree feedback, engagement survey data, KPIs, performance information, and turns all of that into clear insight, identified gaps, development opportunities, and risks for every single manager. Now, if you were doing this manually, you'd easily be spending around £300 per manager just on the analysis and the reporting alone. You also get a personal development plan builder. Once the analysis is complete, the system automatically creates tailored development plans for each manager. Not generic training, not send everyone on the same course. These are personalized development plans that are linked directly to capability gaps, role expectations, and business priorities. So every manager knows the specific areas of improvement, how to improve it, and we provide online modules for each area of management, plus a complete course for newly promoted managers. You get guidance on setting up talent pools and many more depending on what the solution is required for each manager. And that gives us reduced capability gaps, increased productivity, and builds high-performing teams. The beauty of the system is that it removes subjectivity from the full development report. An opinion is backed up with data and development, and actions are suggested that are personalised to each individual rather than a sheep dip approach. And this means that you get your teams on track in the shortest possible time. And the approximate value of that is £300 per manager. You also get the benchmark and performance tracking dashboard. So now everyone has their feedback and everyone's on their development plan, whether they're high achievers or poor performance. And the benchmark and performance tracking dashboard allows you to establish baselines, track improvement, and measure progression over time. Because if you can't measure improvement, you can't prove impact. The benefits are clear visibility of progress, it creates a structured pathway for growth and progression, and it creates measurable evidence of leadership improvement. And the value of the dashboard is approximately £100 per manager. Now, let's make this practical for a moment. Let's say your organisation has 20 managers. For 20 managers, the cost of all the assets would total £21,000. And if I were to come into your organisation personally to design and deliver this from scratch, you'd likely be looking at an extra £24,000 for consultancy fees. Now, the important thing is this: we don't charge per report, per assessment, or per development plan, because that would make the system impossible to scale. Instead, we've simplified everything into one setup investment plus a simple per manager license. So instead of paying £21,000 and instead of paying consultancy fees of £24,000 or more, you can implement the entire high performance people system Stage 1 Elevate for a one-off setup investment of £4,997 plus just one simple per manager license of £197 per manager per year. And here's my promise to you. If you work through the system in 30 days and you don't believe it's worth every penny, contact us and we'll make it right. No complicated process, no long T's and C's, just a full refund. And before you make a decision, let me ask you something. If all this system did was give your managers clear expectations and structured development for the first time, would that be worth it? If it stopped just one high performer from leaving, saving you £30,000 to £50,000, would that be worth it? And if it freed up even 10% of your senior leadership time, currently spent firefighting problems that should have been dealt with at manager level, would that be worth it? Because the real question isn't, can we afford this? The better question is, what is poor leadership already costing us? Because you're paying salaries whether performance is managed or not. So here's where you are right now. You can leave this webinar with the knowledge and build the system yourself. Everything I've shared today gives you the framework to do exactly that. Or you can get the whole thing already built. The templates, the frameworks, the AI prompts, the analysis and the completion of the leadership development reports, the 30-day roadmap, everything you need to assess and uplift your managers and leaders. So here's the next step. Because every organization is different, different structures, different team sizes, different leadership challenges, the next step is to book your free leadership capability strategy session. And on that call, we'll look at your current management structure. We'll identify where the biggest capability gaps may exist, discuss the outcomes of what you want to achieve, and map out what implementation could look like in your organization. If we believe we can help, we'll show you exactly what that would look like. If we don't think it's right for you, then we'll tell you that too. So click the button below and complete the short application form and book your free strategy session. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the other side.